So I'd just like to say good afternoon, dear friends from KC, P2P, and all the sponsors. It's my honor to share with you the Singapore story today. And I'd just like to give a special shout out to my sponsors, Jack and Eric from KC P2P, as well as Maxine and Tab from Operation International. So they've been really instrumental in helping me settle into America and showing me a part of America that's family. So let's see, here we go. Okay, just a little bit about me. So my first name is Joshua, but I also have a Chinese name at the back, and those are the characters that's there. That's because my ethnicity is Chinese, but my nationality is Singaporean. So I'm just Chinese by race. I'm Catholic. My family, that's my beautiful wife. And you can kind of see the beautiful baby, but she's not out yet. She's due in May, so just excited about the delivery. I studied in London, it's the bioset, so I did a undergrad and master's there. And I've been in the army for 12 years now, and I'm an infantry officer by training. So these categories might seem quite normal, but in and of themselves. But by the end of the presentation, I think you'll also find that they have some special meaning to Singapore. Now, if you Google Singapore, I literally typed in Singapore, and you'll find that on Google, you'll have these questions that fall at the bottom. Singapore a part of China? Which country owns Singapore? And etc., etc. So I hope by the end of the presentation, I think we'll have some answers to this. But since this is a little story to begin, Singapore has seemed pretty interesting to Americans. And just last year, there was an American who on Facebook posted a picture of Chattanooga, Tennessee, only that it wasn't Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is actually Marina Bay Sands, Singapore. It's a hotel. And so you can see in the tagline, he said that this is downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it's beautiful. It caused initially an uproar among Singaporeans because it was a bit of cultural appropriation, you know, like there was someone saying, hey, this is our spot. But the interesting thing is that it also sparked a reverse. So Singaporeans started taking American titles and putting them on what Singaporean things were. So you'd see here that our jewel, the man-made waterfall in our airport, is called Niagara Falls. Our Minister of Health at the bottom is Dr. Fauci. We have an orangutan, which is Bigfoot. And we also have our own coffee shops, which are Starbucks equivalents. And that's Joseph Schooling, our swimming Olympian, also known as Michael Phelps. So who says Singaporeans don't have a sense of humor, right? But I think it also belies the fact that our countries both have much in common that we realize. And indeed, speaking about things in common between Singapore and America, there have been notable instances, whether it be from helping delinquent young Americans reform, or setting Hollywood movies, hosting American leaders, or even being unfriended by Russians. I mean, on a serious note, the top left is a rather high-profile incident in the 1990s when Michael Fay, an American citizen in Singapore, was caught vandalizing, so he was caned. But the picture on the right that shows him, he's turned over a new leaf today. So I think, in the grand scheme of things, I think it did well. Hopefully, it did good. The bottom is Crazy Rich Asians. It's a movie, a Hollywood movie about crazy rich Asians that's set in Singapore. But by the end of my presentation, you'll find that Singaporeans are neither rich nor crazy, I think. And then the top right was the Trump-Kim Summit, the historic summit, set in the Capella Hotel. It's also the hotel. It's a beautiful one because that's where my wife and I had our honeymoon. So I think they chose a good spot. And lastly, at the bottom, Singapore was one of those listed as the unfriendly countries because we imposed sanctions on Russia in the wake of the Ukraine crisis. So we do have a lot in common, and I hope that today I'll share with you just what it is about Singapore. That's a Singapore story. We've got quite a lot to cover, but it'll be in three big parts. Firstly, the first part will be on Singapore as a powerhouse. The second part is Singapore as a polity, and the last is Singapore as a people. So it's what I call 200 years of history in 200 seconds. We're often called the accidental nation, and that's because we did come about a bit accidentally. Prior to our modern history, in the 13th century, we were known as Temasek, or it's a sea town in Bahasa Melayu. And it was merely a fishing village that was in between the Srivijaya and the Majapahit empires that were in Malayan Peninsula at the time. The name Singapore originated from Singapura. So Singa is lion, Pura is city. And this was famed after a legend in which one of the Malayan princes of the empires at the time, Sang Nila Utama, landed on the city, on the island, saw a lion and named it Singapura. So that's one of the earliest records of our country. But it really began in 1819. So when an official of the British East Indian Company was looking for a port to compete against the Dutch that was in Indonesia at the time. And so he landed in Singapore and he found that there was sufficient water for a port, and a deep water port. Negotiated with the local sultans, and Singapore became a trading entrepot hub for the British Empire. And it's because it sits strategically between Hong Kong in the east and then India in the west. And so it was a strategic position. And it burgeoned economically, culturally, socially. But we were under British rule until 1942. And as the Japanese, Imperial Japan invaded Southeast Asia, we fell to the Japanese in February of 1942. And it was a humiliating surrender. It was, Singapore at the time had been considered the Gibraltar of the East, impregnable, undestroyable, and yet it had fallen in a matter of less than 100 days. So what then followed were 3 years of painful Japanese occupation, a lot of genocide, interrogations and persecution of the Chinese population. Following the end of World War II, we returned to British rule, but then as with many other colonial countries, we pressed for independence. And in 1963, we gained independence from the British by a merger with the Malaya, forming the Federation of Malaysia. But because of racial tensions and religious tensions between the Malays and the Chinese at the time, they were often instigated by the federal government, or supposedly. The arrangement was not to be, so the merger split just 2 years later, and on the 9th of August 1965, Singapore was born as an independent nation and not just a state of Malaysia. So no one thought at the time that we would last that long. We would in the end become re-merged back into Malaysia, but the leaders at the time, and through sheer grit and foresight, shaped it into what it is today. So that's a bit of our history. Where are we? This shows the two of the longest flights in the world, from LAX and from NYC. So the longest flight is actually in New York City. That's 9,500 miles. To LAX isn't too far away. So if you know that I need to get home to see my wife, that's how long it takes. We're right smack at the south of in Southeast Asia. So that gives a visual representation. And if you do want to take these flights, I highly recommend taking Singapore Airlines or homegrown brand. Pretty good. And just a closer zoom in of Asia. So you can see Singapore by the arrow is at the tip of Malaysia. China is in the north. So it does show that we are not that close to China. I don't think people ask me anymore, like, is Singapore a part of China? But so sometimes China thinks we are a part of China. So it's important to reinforce this as well. The map you see on the right is actually a geographical picture of the Malayan Peninsula. The little island you see, I'm not sure if I got a pointer, but you can barely make out, I think, here we go. Let's see if we can do this. You can barely make out Singapore right here. There you go. So that's my island. And it is pretty small, smaller. It's 295 times smaller than the state of Kansas. It's just about the same size as Leavenworth County. So we really don't have a very big amount of space. And coming to Kansas, yeah, it was, I understood what space means. So our climate is in the region of 75 to 80 degrees all year round. We're an equatorial country. And so we don't have four seasons. It's humid, pretty hot, and monsoon seasons are in November, December, so a lot of rain. But I have to use a lot of warm clothing during winter. Okay, let me see how to, there, here we go. Okay. In terms of location, so where we were, like I mentioned earlier, kind of flowed into how prosperous we became. And it still makes sense today because we have a lot of trade that continues to go. Up to 30% of the world's crude oil flows through the South China Sea and inadvertently through the Straits of Malacca and then to Singapore and onwards to China or Asia. And that's important. But rather than just rely solely on trade and so Singapore, we have diversified our economy. We have other elements like medical tourism, financial services, tourism in general. And we have deliberately wanted to make Singapore a good place to do business. So in this year, we are ranked #1 in the world index of economic freedom. And it's based on elements such as rule of law, stability of the government, as well as our open markets. And we believe highly in ensuring that it is a good place to do business. But it all comes with a cost as well. So high cost of living is a thing. I think we can have a little trivia. So what we call prices, right? Top left is a Toyota Corolla Altis. It's pretty normal sedan in both America and Singapore. You can guess how much it is, I think, but let's see. If you like to, you can put it in the chat, and I can reveal the answers in a bit. But if not, let me just give you a ballpark figure. It's about $70,000 US for a normal 5-seater sedan. At the bottom left, you've got what we call a jumbo flat. That's our public housing. It's an apartment that's about 2,000 square feet. It was recently sold, and it's public housing and it's subsidized. But on the resale market, it can fetch a high price if it's in a good location. So this was going for 1 million Singapore dollars. So it's about 795,000 USD. And I know everyone's complaining recently about the rise in gas prices. So on top right, the gas prices in Singapore have also risen. It's about the same as the US, but the fact is we calculate in liters. So if we converted it to gallons, it's about $8.15 of US dollars a gallon. So you'd say, yeah, then how do we manage? How do we deal? And one of the things in Singapore is the Central Provident Fund. So we've got a government introduced saving scheme where all employees will have to contribute a portion of their salary, 20%, and your employers will also contribute 17% of your salary into a fund that is a savings account, which upon retirement you get access to. So it's kind of a mandatory savings scheme. There was no pension in Singapore, but this is our equivalent, and it is meant so that people work and save and continue to work so that they have a good retirement and have a stable income even after retiring from their job. What really keeps us going? So we don't have a lot of resources. We don't have a lot of land. But all we have is our people. And so we invest in our people. A big part of that is education. And a few important things to note is that since independence, we have mandated that there's education for all. So it's compulsory to take up to until the age of 12, which is what we call primary 6. We have also instituted bilingualism. So English is our official language, it's our first language, but by mother tongue, we need to take a second language. So I can speak Mandarin, and I speak and write Mandarin. We also have interesting education policies to ensure that we maximize the resources to help weaker learners. So we have introduced streaming, where at critical junctures in the education journey, students are streamed according to ability so that resources can also be better designed to help them. And even after graduation, the last point is on lifelong learning. So our government, our country is very big on Skills Future, which is a recent initiative in the last 10 years, where it's increasing employability. And we focus on skills development for mature adults, those in the workforce, to continually upgrade their skills. And there's funds that are given to every Singaporean to do so. So rather than say it, let me try and show it. We all like to say that this is the fine product of Singapore's education. So this is Max. He recently generated some interest online for his pretty outstanding performance on a British quiz show as part of his, and he comes from Imperial, which is my alma mater. So
let's meet the Imperial team for the third time.
Hi, I'm Max Tung. I'm from Singapore and I study biochemistry.
A translation of Boethius and a treatise on the astrolabe are prose works by which English poet who died in 1400?
Oh, died in 1400 is Chaucer.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it has to be, doesn't it? Yeah, Chaucer.
Correct. You're going to take a picture of that map. You're going to see a map of India with a state capital marked. For 10 points, give both the name of the city and the state of which it's the capital.
Imperial Tsung.
Chennai and Tamil Nadu.
That is correct. We follow on from Chennai, the capital of Tamil Nadu, with bonuses on maps showing 3 more Indian state capitals. Again, the state borders have been removed, and again, in each case, you need to give both the city and the state of which it's the capital. Firstly...
that one is Lucknow and Uttar Pradesh.
I'll nominate Song.
Lucknow and Uttar Pradesh.
It is, that's correct. Well done. Secondly...
Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh.
That is correct, yes. And finally...
Kolkata, West Bengal.
Correct. Give 2 answers promptly. Up, down, bottom and top are 4 flavours of quark.
Imperial Tsung.
Strange and charm.
Strange and charmed are the others, yes. In office from 1845, which US president is the subject of a song that mentions Manifest Destiny, the Mexican War and the Oregon Territory?
James K. Polk.
Is it Polk?
James K. Polk is correct. Which early studio album shares its name with a cathedral city on the River Wytham at the junction of Foss Way and Ermine Street?
Wytham is Lincoln, so...
Lincoln.
Yeah.
Correct. Named after an entrepreneur in the steel industry, which city in Indiana experienced rapid population loss in the mid-20th century as a result of the...
Imperial Tsung.
Gary.
Gary is correct. Well done. Right, 10 points for this. Taroko Gorge, Sun Moon Lake, and the National Palace...
Imperial Tsung.
Taiwan.
Taiwan is correct. In physics, the mass ratio of which 2 subatomic particles has a value to the nearest whole number of 1,836.
King's Rashid.
Electrons and neutrons.
Now, you lose 5 points for an incorrect interruption. Anyone want to buzz from...
Imperial Tsung.
Protons and electrons.
It's protons and electrons, yes. Well done. Which northwestern state's panhandle is often referred to as the chimney because of its appearance on a map?
Northwestern state. Idaho, surely.
Idaho?
Idaho is correct. The majority of which state's panhandle is contained within the Tongass Forest?
Alaska.
The largest national forest?
Alaska?
Correct. Nicknamed the mountain state because it is part of the Appalachian system, what is the only US state with 2 panhandles?
Say again.
West Virginia.
West Virginia.
Virginia is correct. 10 points for this. Answer promptly, naming the 2 North American lakes linked by the Welland Canal to the south of Toronto. The natural waterway between these 2 lakes is the Niagara
Imperial
River.
Tsung.
Erie and Ontario.
Correct.
Okay, I must caveat that that is not part of our Singapore curriculum, but he's quite special in his own regard. Nonetheless, you can say that we study hard, and I can testify to that. So it brings us to the next topic, our foreign policy, or rather national security. So Singapore as a polity. And the reason why we invest so much in our people is also because we know that that's really all we've got. And our view on the world is also in related to geography and related to our lack of resources. We are a small country, physically very small, and we understand that in a big world, the rule of law is important so that a country that is sovereign has an equal say. And so, interestingly, in this screen grab that we have is of our foreign minister then in 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea. Well, invaded. It was a very important issue for us because it was in a time when instead of rule of law, it became where might is right. And we had 4 lessons that we drew from the crisis. Almost 8 years to the day later, the same thing applies, and hence we announced those sanctions against Russia because it is something that should not be tolerated. This is informed also by our surrender of Singapore to the Japanese by the British. And we knew that no one else should stand up for Singapore or protect Singapore than Singaporeans. And hence, our foreign policy has been focused on ensuring that there is rule of law internationally. And we believe strongly in that. It also is the reason why we have a strong military. And it's military, the Singapore Armed Forces has 3 services: the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. And we participate as a partner in international and global coalitions. So on the left was the close of our deployment in Afghanistan. And you can see that that is our mission. It's through deterrence and diplomacy, but also to secure a swift and decisive victory. So we ensure that in terms of personnel, in terms of technology, we are one of the most modern in Southeast Asia. The picture at the bottom right shows one of the important and special things about our military, especially in the Army. The bulk of the Army is made up of conscripts. So it's the draft. And it is universal, which means that all males at the age of 18 are required to join national service, and they serve for a period of 2 years, then transiting to the reserve for 10 years. And at the end of it, then they finish their service. So it is a handover from one generation to the next. The man on the left is the uncle of the soldier on the right. He has finished his 10 years of service in the reservists, and he's handing over the flag during the graduation parade from basic training for his nephew on the right. And that's the story that we've seen over the decades that national service has been in place in Singapore. Again, rather than belabor you with the details, the video might be more appropriate. So this is just a snapshot of my Singapore Armed Forces in 2021. And finally, having a strong foreign policy, a strong military is undergirded by having a strong domestic political system. Singapore's political system is, we're a republic that's based on the Westminster system inherited from the British. We have a president, a prime minister, and a chief justice. And since Singapore's independence, the same political party has been in power. There is quite a lively opposition, but we've largely had stability because the government has remained in the same hands for a long period of time. But because of that, what really matters is leadership succession. So from our founding Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, to the second Prime Minister, Goh Chok Tong, and then the third in the middle is Lee Hsien Loong, which is Lee Kuan Yew's son. He was also a graduate of CGSE in the 1970s. The next question is our fourth generation. It's a big question right now for us because we're trying to determine who it would be. And there are currently 3 candidates, I think, that are in the running. And one of them is, again, a CGSE alumnus. So we'll see. That brings me to the last part, which is Singapore as a people. And we are a nation of immigrants, similar to America being a nation of immigrants. And that really started in the modern, in 1819. And that's because we were an entrepot hub and we had a lot of the Chinese who migrated to Singapore as part of the trade, similarly from the Indian subcontinent over to Singapore as a result of the trade that was ongoing. The majority of Singapore is Chinese, ethnically Chinese, with 74% approximately. Then we have 3 other races, so the Malays, the Indians, and the Eurasians. But so these 4 form the core, but within our population, there's a significant, about up to 1 million people who are also on different visa classes who are working. So we have a big population of foreign workers and immigrants today. Just something interesting also is that even though we classify these as the 4 main races in Singapore, there have also been strong intermixing. So the picture on the right shows the Peranakans. So they are what we call Straits-born Chinese. It means Chinese who didn't immigrate in the last 2 or 3 generations, but who over the centuries had migrated and then intermarried with the local indigenous in the Malays and the Malay communities and became a subculture of its own. So my descent is kind of from the Peranakan family, and it's got a very rich, very colorful, as in the Malay and the Chinese are already colorful enough. So this puts the 2 together, and the food itself is also spicy and flavorful and very rich. So it's quite unique to the Southeast Asian culture that we are in. In addition to the social diversity, we have racial diversity, we also have religious diversity. And it was a painful lesson for us when, in the period that we were merged with Malaysia, that there were an outbreak of racially inspired and religiously inspired riots. Since then, we have taken important measures to ensure that there's no religious or racial outbreaks of tension. So from housing quotas to strict laws against hate speech, to even fostering religious harmony by interfaith dialogues. These are all measures that we've taken to ensure that there's religious harmony within Singapore. So the top left shows the riots that happened in 1963, 1964. But the bottom shows that on the same street in Singapore, you can find all the different places of worship on a single street. So in the foreground, you'll see a Chinese temple, Tian Hock Keng. Then just down the road, you'll see that's an Indian Hindu temple. And just next to it is a Methodist church that's all on the same street within walking distance. And indeed, that is the mix of religions that we have in Singapore. And we strongly believe in the freedom of expression of religion. So you can see that diversity is increasing significantly, and we continue to ensure that we want to maintain religious harmony. What's the product of it? I think the best representation is our food. And if you ask me what Singapore's national dish, actually it's very hard to tell you because you'll see in a bit that I really struggle. You might see on some menu something called Singapore noodles, but there's no such thing. Honestly, there's no Singapore noodles in Singapore because we have many different noodles. And we kind of take we take our food very seriously. So just a couple of months ago, one of the New York Times food authors, I think, might have misinterpreted a recipe. So you see the picture on the left is what they call Singaporean chicken curry. It's nothing like the Singaporean chicken curry that's authentic on the right. And so they issued a correction, thankfully, after a lot of uproar of Singaporeans saying that it is not curry. But rather than go on about it again, I think I'd like to show you a video. It is set to the tune of Shanghai Tang, Singapore noodle not included, but you'll see what I mean. I've tried this before, so it doesn't work. So just give me a moment to share my YouTube screen. Go. And
Hey, let's sing a song about our favorite hawker center food. Chủy quế, bak kut teh. You can choose black or white chai tao quế. Murtabak, yummy Hokkien mee and kueh pai tee. Tahu goreng, nasi briyani, chili crab and bak chor mee, chicken satay, barbecue stingray, Indian rojak, sedap nasi lemak, laksa, popiah, otak-otak and roti prata, mie rebus, chicken rice, curry fish, it is so very nice. Mie rebus, chicken rice, curry fish, it is so very nice.
okay, I am feeling hungry now. And so just to, you can understand our challenge then, why I cannot name a Singapore national food because we have too many to choose from. But I think that's just to show you that it's all produced from our diversity and a lot of it is really unique to Singapore and it's a whole mesh of cultures that comes together in one small place. So finally, if that entices you to come and try the food in Singapore, you will also find that we have a strong tourism sector. We are known as the most Instagrammable country in the world. I think it has the most Instagram spots in a small place. And these are all very famous Instagram spots. Some of my American classmates have told me that they've been to Singapore and they've done all this. I confess that having lived there, I haven't taken any of these pictures, but I can tell you where they are. And so one recent addition to our collection is the baby panda on the right, Lila. He was just born a couple of months ago. So he's quite adorable. Finally, I'd just like to share some, I think because we are emerging from this pandemic, some unique things about Singapore, and I think what's relevant is how we responded to COVID. Especially for me coming here, it was a bit of an eye-opener. because in Singapore, given that we are a very densely populated city-state with about 1,000 people per square kilometer, the truth is that we need to be very vigilant. So from the get-go, you can see on the left that just in February in 2020, 2 years ago, before masks were introduced, we already introduced social distancing. And the bottom left picture shows you that these are all the different social distancing markers that were rolled out when the government announced that we needed a social distance. Vaccination was a big thing for us. So we've hit 90% vaccination rates within a few months of vaccinations being rolled out. And we've also taken some additional measures. I think that the US might seem to the US quite different. So what you see below, Safe Entry, is a Bluetooth token and or app that requires all Singaporeans to have a safe entry app in which when they need to enter any government facility or public facility like shopping malls, there is a safe entry barrier that you need to pass through to help with contact tracing. So if you had been in contact with someone who had, or if someone had been in that venue and then later found to be COVID positive, we would be able to trace down who had also visited the same facility or the same restaurant or the same place, and therefore help to quarantine this. So it's something that was rolled out. It's still in place today. At the top right, you also see safe distancing ambassadors. So these are not the police, but these are volunteers or some paid they have the authority to remind as an ambassador to represent and to remind people to put on their masks, to keep the distance when queuing up and social distancing. Masks have been, it's not a controversy, but it has been an important policy. We have enforced it and people have gone to jail for not wearing masks. We've even made sure that it applies to the same. So at the bottom right is a British national who insisted that he was a sovereign, I don't know what that means, but because he's sovereign, the rules don't apply to him and he doesn't need to wear a mask on public transport. So he was later deported. And we only just allowed masks to be donned, to be taken off outdoors. So we've been wearing masks since the pandemic started for 2 years. And only with effect from next week, 1st April, can Singaporeans start to not wear masks outdoors, but indoors will still be applicable. So you can see that we're a lot more stringent in our response to COVID. And it just shows that a lot of it is about making sure that the vulnerable, the elderly especially, don't get impacted. Okay, so I've covered a bit, and just to return to those questions earlier, the questions that were below, is Singapore a part of China? I think we can say no. Which country was Singapore? We are our own people. Is Singapore a safe country? Yeah. And Singapore a country by itself? You bet. The QR code is the link to our tourism video. I didn't show it for the interest of time, but yeah, it's just in keeping with our Digital Nation initiative. You can scan it and you will be able to see our tourism video. So just some parting thoughts that I have. I have shared the story of my country, Singapore story, and I was reflecting on what it means. To me, Singapore is really a meeting place. It's a place where East meets West, the old and the new come together. Race and religion can intermingle. It's where there's tradition, but there's also progress, where it's sometimes about the individual, but a lot of times about the collective, and also where family and faith and certainty and vibrancy all are together in one. And so it's a country of a lot of hope, and we're looking forward. I am looking forward to us growing stronger in the years ahead. Thanks for your time, and hopefully see you not in Chattanooga, but in Singapore soon.
Thank you very much.
It was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Great, informative. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm really hungry.
Me too.
I really like the roti pratas.
Yes. Oh, one of my favorite. Yes.
Yeah, with the eggs. Oh my God.
Yes.
Thank you, Josh. That was excellent.
Welcome, Jack. Yeah. my pleasure. I think Mike has his hand raised.
Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Major Go. That was wonderful. I had a couple questions concerning culture and sense of identity in Singapore. And I'd like to provide a little context. I've spent a lot of time working and studying Taiwan, and I see some similar parallels in terms of an imperial country that has influenced them, Japan for Taiwan, the British for Singapore, and multiple waves of migrations and diversity. And one of my first question is, do Singaporeans really see themselves all as we are Singaporeans, or do they see themselves as I am a Malay Singaporean, I am a Chinese Singaporean? And the second question, which relates, is when I look at the ethnic and cultural demographics that you provided, I believe it said something like 78% consider themselves with a Chinese ethnicity. Is that correct?
Yes.
And just like Taiwan, I'm wondering if it's similar, that there's not a shared sense of Chinese ethnicity in Taiwan. It's through many hundreds of years from different parts of China. And so I'm curious about the breakdown of that connection to the Chinese background. Is it very diverse within this Chinese sense of ethnicity?
So it's a very important question for us, I think, firstly about culture. We're a young nation in that sense. So, and it's because we are so porous in terms of immigration policies, welcoming in terms of and in terms of trade and business, that our composition changes from time to time. So to pin it down to like, what does it mean to be Singaporean? I don't think or rather Singaporeans, we're still figuring out right now. But you know, there's generally 3 levels of culture. So in terms of the artifacts at the surface level, I think there are definitely artifact level things that you can tell a Singaporean in terms of how he speaks, in terms of what he eats, what he wears, and it's fairly distinguishable. But at the deeper levels, if you look at shared beliefs or underlying assumptions, those are a bit more subtle. I think we haven't come to a very clear consensus on what it is. But we do have a certain way of doing things that we value: pragmatism, family, but at the same time progress. Those are things that we do value. And my earlier point about us being a meeting place is precisely because it is a place where we have had a colonial heritage inherited from the West, but we are comprised and we are situated in Asia, in the East, where these cultures come together. And I think right now what we're seeing is that it's a culture that's growing. The point about, I think, whether each ethnicity identifies as an ethnic group, I think, just speaking from personal experience, is that we identify as Singaporeans first, and then our own respective groups second. And particularly for the Chinese, I think why I said we are an interesting case to China is because we are the largest Chinese majority country outside of China that is not a Chinese diaspora or like territory. So if you look at Macau, if you look at Hong Kong, if you look at Taiwan, they're Chinese majorities, but they are in some way affiliated to China. We're the only one that's a sovereign nation on our own. And we view ourselves as sovereign, Singaporean, different from China. And China still cannot understand that at times, but we are truly uniquely Singaporean. So I think that is, that's heartening in a way. So I think Taiwan is similar in that now there are greater calls for greater sentiments of independence, but then they are still formally under the One China policy. There's no such thing with us and China.
Josh, I have similar question like Mike did. Recently in Singapore, there was a survey and 64% of the Singaporean, they think that they have the more positive view about China than US. Whereas in contrast, in Asian Pacific area, 3/4 of the people, they have totally opposite. They have the negative view about the China. So what is that? Is this more Chinese background or what's?
I think it depends on the population as well. I think the older generation has some familial ties. So some of them might still have some familial ties with China if they came from the immigrant, as in if they were, say, second generation or third generation immigrants from China. So generally there is some support for China, probably, especially from the older generation. The younger generation is, I use it loosely, but then we have largely had a Western-based education and a lot more savvy with the media. So I think among this population, we would see there's a higher receptivity towards the Western countries, especially America. So I think we also recognize that China is an important partner in the region. It is a lot of influence and a lot of resources. But our point would be that it's not so much about saying, do I support China or do I support America? We support both, and actually we want both to be on good terms. And for a small country, we want everyone to be on good terms with everybody. So we don't. The last thing we want is to be asked to choose between one or the other, because we don't choose one or the other. We do what's right for Singapore. So I guess that would be why the survey had that kind of data.
Joshua, I'd like to ask a quick question. You mentioned that military service is compulsory for men. What about women? Do they serve? Do they have an alternative? Tell me very briefly about women in your military.
Sure. For women, by our National Service Act, women are also, both men and women, it's all Singaporeans at the age of 18 are eligible to be enlisted. But the funding, one of the principles of national service is that it is universal. But the competing consideration is critical need. So when we say universal, we don't have anything like a selective conscription. There's no number. The moment you're at the age of 18, you go, which means everyone goes. But at the same time, do we need that size? So it's for practical reasons in terms of the size of the army. And so we don't need an army where all the Singaporeans, as in both male and female, need to serve. Hence, we have maintained the policy that all males serve and all females can be enlisted, but there is no critical need as of present. So that's just the legal basis for why females aren't conscripted. Because if we did conscript, we would conscript all females. But do we have females who serve? Yes, we have, and we have a volunteer. We have what we call a volunteer corps. So like myself, I'm a full-time. I'm a regular, as they call it, and we have female regulars, a sizable population, and it's been growing. And we also have a volunteer corps. So this is unpaid, but they volunteer to join and to participate. Not like the National Guard, but similar, that they just do periodic training once every couple of months, and they do some operational duties. So we have those who are regulars and those who are just volunteering to help out and just be a part of the military. So yeah, it's been growing in the last decade. Yeah.
Okay, well, Josh, I have another question. Currently, Singapore holds the fastest movers in the world, the title of the fastest mover, with the speed of 6 to 15 kilometer per hour walking. So why they are in so hurry? I mean, 6 to 15 kilometer per hour, that's something.
You mean walking speed?
Yes, walking on streets.
Yeah, okay. I think it ties to our other data that we are one of the most overworked and stressful countries. So yeah, time is really short. There's a grain of truth in that, because one of the struggles we face is aging population. There's a decreasing birth rate that we have. So our population is a bit like an inverted pyramid. As more and more of our workforce retire and reach a senior age, there's less and less supporting the same number. So we just need to work harder. But we're working on it, trying to make sure that we, so that's why we have, one of the policies was to have immigration in to ensure that we have sufficient manpower supply. But I feel that the long run would still be to have, to increase the birth rate, and I'm doing my best. Yeah.
Okay. If anybody else have any question, go ahead. I have a little bit, one question about the peanut shells. Why everything is banned? You cannot throw chewing gum, you cannot do cigarette, but you can throw peanut shells.
That's new to me. I did not know that. I didn't know. Generally, we're quite strict against littering, so I didn't realize I could throw peanut shells. But I guess they're biodegradable.
That's like historic or something. It's a cultural.
Possibly. Well, they're served a lot at functions, so people do eat it. But I think I'm not sure. It's a good point. I should go and see whether we actually.
Is it true that in your elevators they have urine odor detectors?
Oh,
and if they
no.
set up the alarm and then the door closed, and the door will not open till the authorities arrive.
No. We're not so high tech. Yeah, we're not so high tech. Yeah. We are. I think we also set a limit. Yeah. But yes, we are pretty strict on cleanliness.
Are there any other questions?
Else has?
Zahid, would you like to make your presentation?
Last question. What is the
Okay.
difference between Singlish and English?
Oh, I had a video. I'll just post the link on the chat later on. But Singlish is a derivative of English. It's how do I put it? It's our version of English, and it's a mishmash of all the different cultures. So we've got terms from Malay, Bahasa Melayu. We've got terms from Chinese, the dialects. We've got terms from Tamil, and I think the beauty of it is also very efficient, because when we express something, we express it in as short a phrase as possible. So if you ask a Singaporean, what would sound in formal English is, are you able to do it? If I ask a Singaporean, are you able to do it? I'll just ask him, can or not? Just can or not? And he will reply with me, can. Can or cannot. As an example, so we abbreviate a lot of our terms. And even expressions like expressions of exclaim or surprise or happiness still come to one particular phrase. So it's walao. It's either yes, it just depends on the tone I say it. And I'll send a short video. And you can see it. It was a video of the US Embassy in Singapore trying to tackle Singlish.
Thank you so much for your great presentation, very informative and very delicious food presentation.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we were really impressed, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining us to hear this presentation. It's our tradition that any officer who give the presentation in our chapter members, we present a certificate of appreciation. And Sharon, can you put that? Did you receive that?
Yes, you should be able to see it now.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
So this, I will give it to you, or I will give it to CGSC, and you will have it. And thank you so much for your participation. And we are lucky that amazing officers like you who come here and share their culture, their food, their smiles, everything with us. And when you go back, you will take your memories from here, but we will keep your memories here and cherish for the rest of our lives. I mean, the strength, I mean, the bond between the officers and the Kansas City people is very strong. It's like family bond.
Yes.
You become a part of our family during your stay. And we are so proud that we can serve you as a family here. And we don't want you to feel that you are away from the family.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your.
Thank you, Zahid. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. I see Abigail has joined our
Oh,
meeting.
yes. Hey, just in time.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Have a good
I wish we will visit sometime there.
Yes.
See beautiful Singapore.
Oh,
Thank
yes.
you.
Too.
A brief announcement for
Oh,
our
brief
members.
announcements from. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, the Greater Kansas City chapter will have their annual meeting on April 19th. It will be on Zoom, so look for emails from Zahid with more details. And Sharon, I believe the sponsor recognition is still scheduled for June 3rd up at the fort.
Yes, that's correct.
And the badge ceremony June 9th. There will be other things coming up, and we'll let our membership know as soon as dates have been confirmed. Thank you again so much, Major. That was wonderful presentation.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent.
Yes, thank you.
And love
Thank
to
you so much,
love
Sharon,
to you, Abby.
and Nancy and Sharon Johnson for arranging this circle of knowledge and having us benefit.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Christine has her hand up, I think.
Thank you.
Two languages.